Hi, I'm here to tell you a horror story. This one comes from a Reddit user. I grew up in a small town and moved out at 19 to attend college in a different state. I was excited to start fresh and be away from my family, who were pretty toxic. I got accepted into the school of my dreams and moved into the dorms. All of the students there were friendly and welcoming. My roommate and I became fast friends. She was an only child who had a lot of trouble with her parents back home. She was also very superstitious and believed in ghosts, magic, that sort of thing. I never really believed in any of it until living with her. One night we were getting ready for bed, and she said, "Wait, do you know what day it is?" "No, what day is it?" "Friday the 13th. And then she would always say, "Oh no, nothing bad will happen." But this time she seemed more nervous than usual. I asked if everything was okay, and she said yes, but went to bed early anyway. A few minutes later, I heard loud footsteps coming from the end of our hallway, and they sounded like someone in high heels dragging their feet. I thought it must have been a girl. The footsteps came closer and closer, and then stopped right outside our door. They were directly outside our room. Then I started hearing chains dragging along the floor, heavy chains. I screamed for my roommate, but she was fast asleep. I laid in my bed with the covers over my head until the commotion outside the door slowly came to a halt. In the morning after, of course, I didn't sleep at all. I told my roommate about the noise. She looked pale and immediately ran to the bathroom. She threw up all over the toilet and then collapsed on the floor, sobbing. She said, "You need to leave." "What? Why? Just go home. You need to leave now." I called my mom, who drove me back home that weekend. Back in my hometown, I felt safer and less anxious. One night about a week later, I was watching TV when my mom entered the room and said, "Why haven't you unpacked your things?" I explained about the incident in the dorm, and she didn't believe me. She thought I was making the whole thing up because I was homesick. She told me I was being ridiculous and needed to go back to school. It was just a dream or some animal in the walls or something. Don't be such a baby. So the next morning, she drove me back to school. When we arrived, my roommate looked so relieved to see me. She hugged me and told me how she had no idea where I had been or what had happened to me. "I was so worried you weren't coming back. I unpacked my things and tried to get settled again. I thought maybe it had just been a weird one-time thing and we could move past it." That night, however, the footsteps came back. They came back every single night. They were always the same heavy footsteps, followed by dragging chains. Sometimes I would hear whispers as well. I told my mom again, and she once again told me to suck it up. So I stayed in the dorm despite the constant noise. After a while, I started seeing things in my peripheral vision. I would turn around and look, but never saw anything. There were also times when I would feel the bed shaking, even though I was alone in the room. My roommate refused to talk to me during this time. She said it was for my own good. She knew something was in the room with me, and she didn't want me to leave. She stayed with me every night, never leaving my side. Of course, the school cared more about me being disturbed than they cared about me being stalked by whatever was in the dorm room. They found another room for me in a completely different building. My new dorm room was nice, and I was able to get some rest. The next day I went to find my roommate. I wanted to thank her for staying with me, but I found out she had left the school without telling anyone. I was worried about her, but I knew she would come back. I mean, we had another semester left. About a week later, I heard rumors going around that a girl who lived in my old dorm room had hung herself. I was shocked and saddened. I immediately went to go see the room for myself. My old room was empty, but there was a note on the wall in black marker that read, "She never should have left." Underneath that message, someone had carved, "You can't hide from me." I flipped the light switch and stared at the wall. It spelled out, "I am here." After that day, I never heard the footsteps again. But sometimes I think about how close my old dorm room was to hers. Maybe that's why she didn't want me to leave. Maybe whatever happened to her was because I left her behind. There are some stories that are just sad, and this is definitely one of them. I wonder if the school did anything to remember the girl who died there. That would be interesting to know. I also wonder if the op ever got over the guilt that she left before the other girl died. That would be a tough thing to live with. Do you think op should have stayed at the school? Let me know in the comments below. And let's move on to our next Reddit post. This one comes from another Reddit user. At the age of 20, I was working as a counselor at a summer camp in the woods. As counselors, we were given cabins to live in. This particular summer, a group of older female counselors decided that they wanted to live together in one cabin. It was an old cabin with wood paneling everywhere, beds in 2 of the rooms, a kitchen, and a bathroom. We're talking full-on off-grid rustic cabin. One evening we had just finished dinner when we heard a knock at the front door. Assuming it was another counselor, I didn't answer it. A minute later, there was a second knock. Still no answer. A third knock, louder and more insistent than the last. No answer still. Finally, I opened the door and asked, "What's going on?" No one was there. I closed the door and locked it. Weird, I thought, and went back to whatever show we were watching. About 15 minutes later, we heard pounding on the roof, almost as if someone or something was walking across the roof. And then we started hearing what sounded like screams in the forest. My friends and I looked at each other nervously.
House.
None of us had ever heard anything like it. We decided to change the subject and pretend like nothing had happened. But then the power went out. When the power goes out in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, it doesn't come back on for hours sometimes. So we started to get scared. All of the cabins had battery-powered flashlights hanging from hooks above the beds for emergencies. These flashlights were red to preserve our night vision. So we turned those on and started to play games to keep our minds off the strange occurrences. Then we started hearing voices in the other room, whispering and growling. They seemed to be coming from inside the walls. I grabbed a flashlight and started checking for any possible entry points to the cabin. There weren't any. We checked the windows and they were all locked and nailed shut from the outside. As the night went on, the whispers got louder and more aggressive. We could hear scratching sounds and what sounded like furniture being dragged across the floor. At some point, I don't really remember, we decided to spend the night in the bedroom, huddled together under one of the beds. We never took the covers off the bed, so we couldn't see in the darkness. In the morning after, of course, none of us slept. We unhuddled from under the bed and walked into the other room to investigate. The cabin was trashed. Furniture had been overturned, pots and pans were scattered across the floor, lamps were knocked over and shattered, and the whole place smelled like mildew. We called the director of the camp and told her what had happened. She told us to pack up and leave. She would deal with cleaning the cabin later. To this day, I have no idea what happened that night. But every time I smell mildew, I'm instantly transported back to that night in the cabin. This is truly a horror story. I love how vividly the author describes everything that happened. If I were in that situation, I would probably pass out. I think this is proof that there are definitely some evil spirits out there. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.